On a faraway alien world, under a sky with two suns, there lived a girl who could not be touched. Her name was spoken in whispers, Lyra. She walked among her people like a queen, yet no crown rested on her head. A strange light wrapped around her like a living shield, flowing over her skin, rising and falling like ocean waves. It was not just beauty, it was danger. The stories about her were endless. Some said she had been born inside a falling star. Others claimed she was a weapon, made by the old gods. But the one thing everyone agreed on was this: no weapon could break her enchantment. Warriors came from across the galaxy. Some carried swords forged from the core of dying planets. Others brought plasma rifles so powerful they could melt a warship's hull. All tried, all failed. The moment their blades touched her light, they vanished, not cut, not burned, simply gone. As if the universe had swallowed them whole. The people feared her, yet they worshipped her too. She lived high above the ground in a floating fortress of black stone, guarded by creatures with eyes like burning coals. The fortress drifted in the air like a dark cloud, moving with the wind but never falling. It was said the walls inside could change shape, making anyone who entered lose their way, until the guardians found them in the nearby villages. No one dared to speak her name loudly. Children were told bedtime warnings: do not follow the glowing woman, or you will never return. Traders made the long journey around her territory, even if it took days longer. But one day, a human named Ethan Cross stepped off his small starship at the edge of her land. He was not a warrior, at least not in the way others were. His clothes were plain, his pack light, his weapon belt empty. He had heard of Lyra before, not from the traders or the warriors, but from a dying soldier on a distant battlefield. That soldier's last words had been strange. She is not what they say. Find her and laugh. Ethan didn't know what it meant, but he was curious. And curiosity, he believed, was more dangerous than any weapon. The village elders tried to stop him. She is not for you, human, one old man warned, leaning on a crooked staff. She will unmake you. She will pull the breath from your chest and leave nothing but a shadow. Ethan only smiled. Maybe she's just waiting for the right person to walk through her door. The elder spat on the ground. Many have walked through her door, none have returned. Despite the warnings, Ethan began the climb toward the floating fortress. The path was steep and broken, the air thin and sharp. Halfway up, he saw the first of her guardians, a beast with a long scaled body and too many legs, its eyes glowing. With red light, it did not attack. It only watched him pass, as if judging his worth. When he finally reached the last step, the fortress loomed above him, its black stone walls humming faintly. The gate was open, but inside was darkness, deep and heavy. He stepped forward. The darkness did not hide her, in fact. It seemed to shape itself around her. Lyra stood at the center of the great hall, her skin glowing with that strange living light. She was not armored, yet she looked untouchable, her eyes pale as ice, fixed on him without blinking. "You came without a weapon," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "Should I have brought one?" Ethan asked. "It would not matter," she replied, her lips curling into the faintest smile. "No weapon can break me." Ethan tilted his head. "What about words?" Her smile faded just a little. "Words cannot pierce my shield." He took another step closer. "What about laughter?" She blinked. It was a tiny thing, almost invisible. But he saw it. The guardians in the shadows stirred, sensing something they had never felt before. Doubt, Ethan chuckled softly. It was not mocking, not cruel. It was the kind of laugh a man gives when he has already made up his mind. The sound echoed through the hall, bouncing off the black stone walls like it had nowhere else to go. No one had ever laughed in her presence before. Warriors came with anger, with fear, with desperate courage, but never with amusement. Lyra's light flickered, so faintly that only someone watching very closely would notice. She stepped down from the raised platform, her bare feet making no sound on the stone floor. "You are strange, human," she said, circling him slowly. "Others come here to prove their strength. You seem to think this is a game." "Not a game," Ethan said, still smiling. "Just interesting." Her eyes narrowed. The light around her brightened again, wrapping her in its shimmering glow. But this time, it didn't feel as solid as before. Somewhere deep inside, Lyra felt something she had not felt in years. A question. That question was dangerous. Ethan had not even raised a hand, yet something about him was already pulling at the edges of her enchantment. And for the first time since the fortress had been built, the girl no one could touch took a step back. The fortress seemed alive. As Ethan stood there, the black stone walls shifted with a low rumble, forming new arches and narrow paths. It was as if the fortress was testing him, watching his every step. Lyra did not order her guardians to attack. She simply turned and began walking deeper into the twisting halls. Her light illuminated the way, casting strange moving shadows on the walls. Ethan followed, his boots silent on the smooth stone. He could feel the air change, warmer in some places, freezing cold in others. The fortress was designed to confuse, to disorient, to break the will of those who dared enter. But Ethan's pace stayed steady, his face calm, almost curious. "Most who enter my home do not make it past the first gate," Lyra said without looking back. "They run or they scream. Some beg." Ethan's reply was quiet but sharp. "And you enjoy that?" She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes glowing faintly. "It reminds me that I am above them, stronger than them, untouchable." Ethan smiled slightly. "Or maybe it just reminds you you're alone." Her steps slowed, just for a heartbeat, before she led him into a massive chamber. The floor here was a mirror-like surface, black and shining, reflecting the strange blue light that came from no visible source. The air shimmered, as if heat and ice were mixing together, from the far side of the room. Two of her guardians emerged, creatures unlike anything Ethan had seen. Their bodies were made of shifting crystal, their heads like those of hunting birds, their wings razor-sharp. They moved without sound, yet the weight of their presence pressed down on the air. "Before anyone speaks to me," Lyra said softly, "they must pass the trial." Ethan looked at the guardians, then back at her. "And if I don't, then the fortress will keep you forever." The guardians circled him, their crystal feathers catching the strange light. Each step they took caused the mirrored floor to ripple as if it were water. Most men would have reached for a weapon, prepared to fight or die. Ethan only stood there, eyes moving between the two creatures, his posture relaxed. "What is this trial?" he asked. Lyra smiled, a slow, confident curve of her lips. "It is not about strength. It is not about speed. It is about truth." The guardians stopped moving. Their heads tilted toward Ethan, as if listening. Lyra stepped closer, her glow now brighter than before. "You will tell me something. Something that is real. Something that carries weight. If it is false, they will tear you apart. If it is true, they will let you pass." Ethan tilted his head, studying her. "So, no fighting?" "No fighting," she said, her voice like silk over steel. He took a slow breath, looking at the crystalline guardians again. "All right, I have one." He stepped forward until he was close enough to see the faint patterns in the light that wrapped around her. "You think your enchantment keeps you safe? But it's not a shield, it's a wall. And you're the one locked inside." The moment the words left his lips, the guardians froze completely, their bodies turning still like statues. The shimmering air in the chamber seemed to pulse. Lyra's smile vanished. For the first time, her light flickered in a way she couldn't control. "How?" she began, her voice sharper now. "Did you know that?" "Oh." Ethan's eyes didn't. "Leave hers. Because I've met others who wear the same look. Warriors. Prisoners. People who mistake their cage for their strength." The mirrored floor rippled violently beneath their feet, and the crystalline guardians stepped back. Lowering their wings, Lyra's heartbeat quickened, though she'd never admit it. The trial had never been passed this way before, and for the first time in years, she wondered if this human was not here to break her, but to free her. The great chamber was silent. The crystalline guardians stood frozen like carved statues, their sharp wings tucked tight against their bodies. The mirrored floor no longer rippled, it was still, as if holding its breath. Lyra's pale eyes were locked on Ethan. No challenger had ever stood before her like this, with no weapon, no fear, and now, no respect for the rules of her world. "You passed my trial," she said slowly, "but you are still a fool to be here." Ethan tilted his head. "Am I?" "Yes," she answered, stepping closer until the edge of her glowing shield was almost touching him. "You don't understand what I am, human. I could destroy you before you take your next breath." Ethan looked into her eyes, not at the light, not at the power, but at the woman behind it. And then, without warning, he laughed. It wasn't a quick laugh or a nervous one. It was deep, steady, and filled the chamber like a rolling wave. The sound bounced off the high stone walls and echoed in the mirrored floor, making it seem as if the room itself was laughing with him. The guardians' heads twitched, confused. Lyra's light flickered faintly. No one had ever laughed here before. Her voice sharpened. "Why do you laugh?" Ethan's eyes softened, but his grin stayed. "Because you speak like you've already won. And I've met enough people to know, the ones who talk like that are the ones trapped the most." Her steps faltered. Just a little. But in a place like this, even a heartbeat of hesitation was dangerous. The glow around her shifted as if the air between them was thinner. Lyra could feel the edges of her enchantment, and for the first time in centuries, felt less like armor and more like a chain pulling at her skin. She tried to hide it, circling him slowly. "Do you think you're the first to try to break me?" "No," Ethan said simply, "but I think I'm the first who isn't trying." She stopped moving. The words hit her harder than any weapon ever had. The silence stretched between them. Heavy and strange, Ethan took another step forward, so close now that the glow of her shield brushed his chest. It didn't burn him. It didn't push him back. It only trembled faintly, like it was unsure. "You know," he said with a quiet smile, "power is easy to fear, but it's much harder to fear someone who isn't trying to hurt you."
Iris.
Breath caught, not from weakness, but from something unfamiliar. A crack had formed, not in the shield itself, but in the certainty she had always carried, and deep in the dark corners of the fortress, the ancient magic that kept her untouchable. Began to listen. The fortress seemed to sense the change before Lyra did. The black stone walls groaned softly, as if old foundations were shifting under invisible weight. The mirrored floor darkened, swallowing its own reflection. Lyra stood still, her glow bright but unsteady, like a candle fighting the wind. No weapon had ever done this. No army had ever reached this far. Yet here was a human with empty hands and a steady gaze, pushing her to the edge without striking a single blow. Ethan's voice broke the silence. "You've been told your shield is your strength," he said. "But what if it's your prison?" Her jaw tightened. "You speak as if you understand." "I do," Ethan replied. "I've worn armor before, not the kind you can see. The kind that keeps you alive but keeps you alone." Lyra's breath grew slow, uncertain. The magic around her shifted, the glowing patterns along her skin breaking their perfect rhythm. "You're lying," she whispered. "If I was," Ethan said calmly, "you wouldn't be listening." He stepped closer, and this time her shield didn't push back. The glow around her faltered, growing thin in the space between them. Ethan began to speak, not of battle or conquest, but of life beyond walls. He told her about nights under alien skies with strangers who became family, about laughter that cut through fear, about choosing to live even when death was easier. With each word, the fortress trembled. The crystal guardians in the hall shifted uneasily, their glowing eyes flickering. Lyra felt something she had not felt in centuries. Weight. Not the weight of her shield, but the weight of choice. "Stop," she said, but her voice was no longer commanding. It was pleading. Ethan didn't stop. "The real question isn't whether I can break you," he said. "It's whether you want me to." Her heart pounded, the glow flared, then dimmed again. And for a single breath, the air between them was empty. No shield, no magic, nothing. Lyra gasped, stumbling back a step, her hand clutching her chest as if she'd been struck. But there was no pain, only the strange feeling of freedom. The unbreakable enchantment had cracked, not from force, but from something far more dangerous. Lyra's glow was fading, but the air around her still hummed with old power, restless, unstable, as if deciding whether to return or disappear forever. She stood in the center of the hall, breathing hard, her pale eyes fixed on Ethan. For the first time, her voice carried no certainty. "You don't know what you've done," she said. Ethan stepped closer, his tone steady. "Then tell me." Her gaze drifted to the black stone walls, as if the fortress itself was listening. "This shield was never mine. It was placed on me by the Galactic Council, not to protect me, but to contain me." Ethan frowned. "Contain you? Why?" She hesitated, then spoke as if the words themselves were dangerous. "Because I was born with a gift they could not control. I can reshape matter, turn stone into water, light into metal, breath into roof, fire. The council feared I would change the balance of their empire." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "So they trapped you inside your own skin." Lyra nodded, her voice growing bitter. "They called it a blessing, said it would keep me safe. But the truth is, it's a prison that made me their trophy. Warriors came to break me, and when they failed, my legend grew. The more they feared me, the easier I was to control." The crystal guardians at the edge of the chamber shifted, their heads tilting as if they too were hearing this truth for the first time. Ethan stepped forward. Now only a breath away from her, "You could have broken it yourself." Her eyes dropped to the floor. "No, the enchantment feeds on resistance. The more I tried, the stronger it became. Could only break if someone saw me as more than a weapon." The last word hung in the air like a blade. Ethan's voice softened. "And now that you're free, what will you do?" Lyra looked up at him, her glow now only a faint shimmer on her skin. "I don't know. Without the shield, I'm not untouchable. I can be hurt. I can bleed." He held her gaze. "Then maybe you can live." But before she could answer, a deep rumble rolled through the fortress. The floor shook beneath them. Outside, the sky filled with shapes, dark, sharp, moving fast. Lyra's face went pale. "The council knows they're coming." The fortress groaned under the weight of the coming storm. Through the high, jagged windows, the sky was no longer blue. It was filled with black metal shapes, sliding through the clouds like predators. Galactic Council warships, their hulls, were covered in silver patterns that pulsed like veins of light, weapons already glowing in their ports. Each ship moved in perfect silence, but the air trembled with the hum of their engines. Lyra stood frozen for a heartbeat, her bare feet gripping the mirrored floor. Out. Without her shield, the fortress no longer felt safe. For the first time in centuries, the walls around her seemed too thin. Ethan stepped to her side, his eyes fixed on the dark shapes above. "How many?" "Too many," she said softly. "They never travel in less than a dozen ships. They'll want to make a point." From the shadows, the crystal guardians stirred, their bodies shifting and hardening as if readying for battle. But Lyra knew they were no match for the council's machines. A voice echoed through the fortress, cold and amplified. "It is, Lyra, of the shattered gift. You have broken the terms of your containment. You will surrender immediately." Ethan smirked faintly. "Polite, aren't they?" Her eyes didn't leave the sky. That was not a request. That was the last warning. He turned toward her. "So what happens if you don't go with them?" "They'll burn the fortress to the ground," she said, "and anyone in it." The hum of the engines grew louder. The air became heavier, pressing on their chests. Outside, the warships began to split formation, surrounding the fortress from all sides. Lyra's hands curled into fists. "I could fight them. Maybe. Even win. But without the shield, I'd be risking your life." Ethan finished for her. She looked at him, searching for some hint of fear. There was none. He stood like a man who had already made peace with the danger ahead. "You're not leaving." She said, "No," he replied simply. "They came here for you. They can deal with me too." Outside, the first beam of light tore down from the clouds, striking the floating platform beneath the fortress. The stone shuddered, cracks racing. Across the floor, dust rained down from the ceiling. The council voice returned, sharper now. "Last chance, Lyra. Step forward or watch your sanctuary fall. Her heart pounded. She'd never faced them without her shield, never felt so exposed. But something in Ethan's steady gaze made her stand taller. If she was going to face them, she would do it as more than a prisoner. The warships closed in, their black shadows covering the fortress like a storm. The air shimmered with the heat of charged weapons. The sky split by beams of blue light that struck the stone platforms, breaking them apart piece by piece. Ethan stood at the center of the hall, between Lyra and the open gates. His hands were empty, his stance calm, but his eyes locked on the advancing soldiers, who now poured from the landing craft. Their armor was polished silver, their faces hidden behind glass visors that reflected the glow of the council insignia. The lead soldier's voice boomed through a helmet speaker. "Step aside, human. She belongs to the council." Ethan didn't move. "No, she doesn't belong to anyone." The soldiers raised their weapons, lines of red light targeting his chest. Lyra's heart clenched without her shield. She could not stop the blasts in time. But Ethan only laughed. It wasn't loud this time, but it carried through the hall, like a spark in dry air. The soldiers hesitated. Even the warships above seemed to pause. Lyra stepped forward, placing a hand against the place where her shield once glowed. "I don't have the enchantment anymore," she whispered, "but I still have my gift." Her eyes closed. She drew in a breath, and when she opened them again, the faintest shimmer of power curled around her fingers, not the cold. Perfect shield from before, but raw, living energy. The soldiers fired. The energy burst outward from her hand, not as a wall, but as a wave of twisting light that struck the beams midair, bending them away, scattering them harmlessly into the sky. The shockwave rolled across the landing platforms, knocking the soldiers back like leaves in a windstorm. The warships tried to retreat, but the energy caught their engines, turning metal to stone, stone to dust. One by one, they fell from the sky, sinking into the clouds like broken birds. The fortress shook violently, but it was still standing when the silence finally returned. Lyra dropped to her knees, her glow dim but steady. Ethan was at her side in an instant, catching her before she fell. "You're hurt," he said. She shook her head weakly. "No, just free." He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "So what now?" Lyra's gaze lifted to the open sky, no ships, no chains, only endless space. Now she said, "I see what it feels like to live without walls." Ethan helped her to her feet. Together, they walked to the edge of the fortress, the wind pulling at their hair, the sun breaking through the last of the dark clouds. The council would come again. They both knew it. But this time, she wouldn't face them alone. And for the first time in centuries, Lyra smiled, not because she was untouchable, but because she was free.